When your child rolls their eyes and mutters whatever after you've said no, it doesn't just irritate you, it hits something deeper. Your body reacts before your mind does, your chest tightens, your jaw clenches. You feel that instant urge to correct them, to explain yourself, to make sure they understand why that tone is unacceptable. Most parents assume that if they don't address it immediately, they're letting disrespect slide. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you launch into an explanation, you're often doing the exact opposite of what you intend. You're not stopping back talk, you're training it. This is where most parents go wrong, and it's not because they're careless or permissive, it's because the response feels logical, responsible even. Your child says, "You never let me do anything." You think they need to understand why I said no. So you explain, you justify, you defend, and over the next few days, the eye rolls increase. The tone sharpens, the comments escalate, it feels confusing, you're talking more, not less, you're trying harder. And yet, the behavior is getting worse. Here's why. To a child's brain, backtalk doesn't register as bad behavior that needs correction. It registers as a successful strategy, not consciously but neurologically. When you respond with long explanations, emotional reactions, or defensive energy, you send a powerful message. This works. Backtalk becomes a conversation starter, a way to pull you into debate, a tool to get your full attention. And attention, especially emotionally charged attention, is one of the strongest reinforcers in child behavior. Most parents think they're correcting their tone. What they're actually doing is rewarding escalation. Think about how these moments usually play out. You say no to screen time before homework. Your child huffs, crosses their arms, and says, "You're so mean, everyone else gets to." Immediately, your nervous system reacts. You feel misunderstood, accused, maybe even disrespected, so you respond with logic. "That's not true. I'm not everyone else's parent. You had screen time yesterday. We've talked about this." From your perspective, you're being reasonable. From your child's brain, something very different is happening. Their emotional system is now fully engaged, and you just joined them there. The moment you argue, explain, or defend, the boundary stops being a boundary. It becomes a negotiation. Even if you win the argument, you lose something more important. You teach your child that pushing back hard enough gets a response. That's why backtalk doesn't fade on its own. It intensifies. The same thing happens with lectures. A muttered comment under the breath turns into a 5-minute speech about respect and gratitude. You're hoping something finally clicks, but once a child is emotionally activated, their thinking brain is offline. Your words don't land as guidance, they dissolve into noise. What they absorb isn't your lesson, it's your intensity. And intensity feeds intensity. None of this means you're a bad parent. In fact, it means the opposite. These reactions come from care, from investment, from wanting to teach values. But intention doesn't matter to the brain. Patterns do, and right now the pattern your child's nervous system is learning is simple. Backtalk leads to engagement. Engagement leads to power. Power keeps the behavior alive. In the next part, we'll look at what's actually happening inside your child's brain during these moments, and why the solution isn't more explaining, more correcting, or more emotion, but something far simpler that most parents never consider. To change this pattern, you have to stop looking at backtalk as a behavior problem and start seeing it as a brain state problem. Because when your child talks back, they're not choosing disrespect in the way adults imagine. Their brain is operating from a completely different system than the one you're trying to reason with. Here's what's really happening. The moment your child feels blocked, disappointed, or powerless, when you say no, set a limit, or deny a request, their emotional brain takes over. This part of the brain is fast, reactive, and primitive. Its job isn't logic, its job is survival and control. At the same time, the thinking brain, the part responsible for reasoning, empathy, and self-control, goes partially offline. That's not a metaphor, it's neuroscience. So when you start explaining, negotiating, or defending your decision, you're talking to a part of the brain that literally cannot process what you're saying. To them, your calm logic sounds like noise. Like static, like Charlie Brown's teacher, what they do pick up on is your tone, your volume, your emotional charge. And here's the part most parents never realize. Your nervous system and your child's nervous system are linked at that moment. This is called co-regulation. When you escalate even slightly, their system escalates with you. When you stay calm, their system has a chance to settle. But when both of you are activated, the situation feeds itself. This is why backtalk often gets louder the more you respond. From the outside, it looks like defiance. Inside the brain, it's dysregulated. Now add one more layer. Children are wired to test patterns. Their brains are constantly asking one question: what works here? Not morally, practically. So when your child says you're the worst and you respond emotionally, hurt, defensive, or lecturing, their brain makes a simple association. Strong words right arrow strong reactions, not because they want to hurt you, but because the strategy succeeded. This is why explaining feels right but backfires. Explaining feels like teaching. But in an activated brain, it functions as fuel. Debating feels fair, but it teaches that rules are flexible under pressure. Lecturing feels responsible, but it overwhelms a nervous system that's already overloaded. Over time, the brain learns a rule you never meant to teach. If I escalate, I gain influence. That's the pattern we're breaking. And here's the counterintuitive part. You don't break this pattern by being colder, stricter, or louder. You break it by becoming boringly predictable. When a behavior no longer produces stimulation, debate, or emotional payoff, the brain stops investing energy in it. This is basic behavioral psychology. And this is why short responses outperform long ones. A brief, neutral response does something powerful neurologically. It doesn't feed the emotional brain, it doesn't activate a power struggle, it doesn't create content to argue with. Instead, it creates a wall. Not a harsh wall, a calm one. Your child's brain hits it and gets nothing back. No drama, no debate, no reward. In the next part, I'll show you the exact response that creates this effect, why it feels wrong at first, and how to use it without sounding cold, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable. Once you understand what's happening in your child's brain, the solution becomes almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. It isn't a lecture, it isn't a consequence, it isn't a long, thoughtful explanation. It's a single sentence delivered in 3 seconds or less, and that's exactly why it works. Most parents overestimate how much language is needed to correct behavior. But when a child is emotionally activated, less language is more authority. Here's the mistake to avoid before we get to the fix. Parents assume that silence equals weakness. That if they don't say enough, the child won't take them seriously. In reality, the opposite is true. Authority collapses when it explains itself under pressure. So here's the rule. When your child talks back, you respond once briefly and neutrally, and then you stop talking. No justification, no emotion, no follow-up. The most effective phrases all share 3 characteristics. They set a boundary, they don't engage the content, they don't invite a response for everyday sass or attitude. The phrase is simple: try again respectfully. That's it. No lecture about tone. No explanation of why it's disrespectful. No warning about consequences. Just one calm sentence. If your child is more escalated, raising their voice, crying, or visibly upset, you adjust slightly. I'll listen when you're calm. Or, that tone doesn't work. And again, you stop. This is where most parents break the method. They deliver the line and then keep talking. They explain what they mean, they clarify, they soften it. And the moment they do, the wall disappears. The power of this response isn't in the words. It's in what comes after the words. Nothing, silence. That silence isn't punishment, it's information. Your child's brain is waiting for the debate, waiting for the argument, waiting for the emotional reaction. And it doesn't come. For the first few seconds, they often look confused, almost startled, like they're waiting for the rest of the script. Then they try again, they might push harder. That's not fair, you always do this. You're so mean. Your job is not to correct the content. You repeat the boundary, I'll listen when you're calm. And then again you stop. No new words, no new emotion, no escalation. This feels unnatural at first because parents are wired to repair, to explain, to smooth things over. But what you're doing here is teaching something much more important than politeness. You're teaching how communication works in your family. You're showing your child disrespect doesn't open doors, emotion doesn't change outcomes, calm communication gets access. This is not ignoring your child. It's delaying the conversation until their brain is capable of having it. And that's the key difference. When they do calm down, and they will, you re-engage immediately. You reward the regulation, not the back talk. They try again with a calmer tone. Can I please have a friend over this weekend? That's when you respond. You can still say no, you can still hold the boundary, but you acknowledge the effort. Thank you for asking respectfully. That one sentence teaches more than any lecture ever could. In the next part, we'll walk through exactly what this looks like in real life, what to expect in the first week, why behavior often gets worse before it gets better, and how to stay consistent when your child tests the boundary harder than ever. This is the part most parents aren't prepared for and where many give up too early. Because when you stop feeding the backtalk pattern, your child's behavior often spikes before it fades, not because the method isn't working, but because it is. Psychologists call this an extinction burst. Think of it like a vending machine that used to give snacks when you shook it. One day you shake it and nothing comes out. What do you do next? You shake it harder. You hit more buttons, you apply more force to see if the old rule still applies. That's exactly what your child's brain does. The first few days you use the 3-second response. You may see louder back talk, more dramatic reactions, eye rolls with extra attitude, attempts to pull you back into debate. This is not defiance. It's confusing. Their brain is testing. Did the rules change, or do I just need to push harder? If you break during this phase, if you suddenly explain, argue, or lecture, you accidentally teach them the opposite lesson. Escalation works if I escalate enough. That's why consistency matters more than perfection. Let's look at what this actually sounds like in real life. Your 9-year-old asks if a friend can come over. You say no, they snap. That's not fair, you never let me do anything. Every instinct in your body wants to respond with facts, with proof, with logic. Instead, you say, try again respectfully. And you stop, they stare at you, waiting, then they push again. Everyone else's parents let them. You're so mean. You feel it, that pull to defend yourself. You don't, you say, I'll listen when you're calm, and you stop talking. Now one of 3 things usually happens. First option, they storm off. They slam a door, stomp their feet. That's okay. You didn't fail. You didn't lose authority. You didn't ignore them. You simply refuse to argue with dysregulation. Second option, they stand there breathing hard, searching for their next move. This pause is powerful. It's their nervous system recalibrating. Third option, they try again, still frustrated but calmer. Can I have a friend over this weekend instead? That's your opening. You engage immediately. You might say, thank you for asking respectfully. Today is still no, but we can talk about this weekend. Notice what you didn't do. You didn't reward the back talk, you rewarded the repair. Now let's talk about older kids and teens, because parents often think this won't work past early childhood. It does. A 15-year-old asks to go to a concert on a school night. You say no, they fire back, this is ridiculous. I'm old enough to decide for myself. Instead of launching into a speech about responsibility, you say, I hear you, but that tone won't change my answer. And you stop, they retreat, they cool off. 20 minutes later, they come back. Can we talk about this? Now you have a real conversation because their thinking brain is back online. This is the distinction most parents miss. You're not shutting down communication, you're postponing it until it's productive. In the next part, we'll talk about the long-term shift this creates, how authority returns without fear, why your child actually feels safer with this approach, and the one common mistake that can quietly undo everything if you're not careful. If you stay consistent through the early testing phase, something begins to change quietly, almost without you noticing at first. The eye rolls come less often, the sharp comments lose their edge. The arguments don't spiral the way they used to, not because your child is afraid of you, not because you won, but because their brain has learned a new rule. Back talk no longer works. By the second or third week, most parents notice a subtle pause after they say no. Their child hesitates. You can almost see the internal calculation happening. If I push, I hit the wall. If I calm down, I get access. That pause is regulation beginning to replace reaction. And this is where real authority comes from, not control, not fear, not exhaustion from endless power struggles, but predictability. Your child starts to trust that. Your boundaries don't move under pressure. Emotional escalation doesn't change outcomes. Calm communication is the fastest path forward. That trust creates safety. And safety is the foundation of respect. This is the part parents often get wrong about authority. They think authority means being listened to immediately. In reality, authority means being believed that you mean what you say every time. Now let's talk about the one mistake that can quietly undo all of this. It's subtle, it's common, and most parents don't even realize they're doing it. They apply the 3-second response sometimes. On a calm day, they hold the boundary. On a stressful day, they explain. On a tired night, they lecture. To a child's brain, inconsistency doesn't feel human, it feels strategic. And that teaches a dangerous lesson. Maybe the wall is negotiable, I just have to find the right moment. That's why this method only works when it becomes automatic, not harsh, not robotic, just consistent. And here's something important to understand. You are not dismissing your child's feelings. You are separating feelings from delivery. After your child calms down, you absolutely can validate their disappointment, acknowledge their frustration, explain your reasoning, even negotiate if appropriate, but only after regulation. That timing matters because when you talk about feelings while emotions are high, you feed the fire. When you wait, you teach emotional literacy. Over time, something remarkable happens. Instead of saying, "You're so unfair," your child starts saying, "I'm really disappointed." Instead of yelling, "You never let me do anything," they say, "Can we talk about this?" That shift isn't accidental, it's learned. You taught them that respect isn't about silence, it's about how communication works. Now imagine this a month from now, your child asks for something, you say no, they pause, they sigh, and they say, "Okay," no drama, no argument. No negotiation, or they say, "I don't like this, but I get it." That's not a fantasy. That's the natural outcome when you stop feeding the backtalk pattern and start modeling calm authority. So remember the rule. When your child talks back, pause, deliver one neutral sentence in 3 seconds or less, then stop talking. No explanation, no defense, no lecture, just calm, consistent authority. And over time, you'll notice something powerful. The backtalk fades, your authority strengthens, and your relationship improves. Not because you controlled your child into submission, but because you showed them again and again that respectful communication is the only path that works.